April 25th, 1945, 0612 hours, 3 miles east of Arnhem, Netherlands. The dawn came cold and grey over the flooded lowlands. Mist rose from the canals like smoke from a dying fire. In a drainage ditch, partially filled with freezing water, a man lay motionless. His name was Elias Thornwell. He was 26 years old. He was from Oklahoma, and in his hands he held something that would have made any military engineer laugh. A cucumber, hollowed out, carved with a trench knife, secured to the muzzle of his M1903 Springfield rifle with strips of cloth and copper wire. It looked absurd, like something a child would build playing soldier in the backyard. 180 yards ahead, across a frozen field, 120 German soldiers prepared their morning defenses. They moved with the casual confidence of men who believed they were safe. Their forward positions were strong, their flanks protected. Their intelligence report said the nearest Americans were still 2 miles west. Their intelligence was wrong. Thornwell settled the rifle against his shoulder. Through his iron sights, he watched a German officer lean over a map spread across the hood of a Kubelwagen. The officer was shouting orders, pointing, organizing, leading. Thornwell's finger found the trigger. His breath slowed, his heartbeat steadied. The cold water soaking his legs disappeared from consciousness. The distant sound of artillery faded to nothing. There was only the crosshairs, only the target, only the moment between decision and execution. He squeezed. The rifle bucked with familiar recoil, but the sound was wrong. Instead of the sharp crack that normally announced a Springfield shot, there was a muffled thump, like someone beating a rug, like a distant door slamming. The German officer collapsed. Around him, soldiers froze, looking, listening, searching for a threat they couldn't identify. No crack of rifle fire, no visible muzzle flash, no sense of direction, just their officer, dead on the ground. Thornwell cycled the bolt, smooth, practiced. The cucumber was still intact, smoke rising from the scorched interior. But the structure held. He fired again. A German sergeant dropped, and again, a radioman fell backward. By the time the cucumber split apart from the heat, 4 Germans lay dead. The others were running, firing blindly, shouting questions no one could answer. Thornwell reached into his pack, pulled out another cucumber, slid it onto the barrel. 8 seconds. He'd timed it 100 times. He kept shooting. This wasn't some secret military technology. This wasn't classified research from a government laboratory. This was a farm boy from Oklahoma, using the exact same trick he'd learned as a child to shoot gophers without scaring the rest away. In the next 40 minutes, Elias Thornwell would kill 41 German soldiers. In the next 48 hours, he would kill 97. Not because he had better weapons than anyone else, not because he was born with exceptional talent, but because he understood something most soldiers never learned. In war, confusion kills faster than bullets. Before we show you how Thornwell's childhood trick saved American lives in the Netherlands, this story took over 50 hours to research. We went through declassified after-action reports from the 2nd Infantry Division, German casualty documents captured after the war, Thornwell's personal diary, donated to the National WWII Museum in 2003. If you value these investigations into forgotten military innovations, subscribe right now. Let's get back to Oklahoma. 1928. When Elias Thornwell was 9 years old, Cimarron County, Oklahoma, the northwest panhandle, the part of the state so flat you could see weather systems coming from 50 miles away, where the horizon was a straight line drawn with a ruler, where the wind never stopped, where the soil was black and rich and deep, until it wasn't. The Thornwell family worked 240 acres, wheat mostly, some cattle, a vegetable garden that Eli's mother tended like it was sacred ground, because in many ways, it was. Eli's father, William Thornwell, had fought in France in 1918, the Western Front. He'd come home with a Purple Heart and a permanent limp, and memories he never discussed. Eli was born in 1919, just before William shipped out. By 1928, when Eli was 9, the land was beginning to change. The rain came less frequently, wheat yields dropped, dust devils danced across the fields, and the gophers multiplied. Richardson's ground squirrels. They lived in colonies, hundreds of them, digging burrows, eating seeds, destroying roots. A single gopher could eat a quarter-pound of vegetation per day. A colony of 200 could strip a garden bare in a week. One morning in June, Eli's father took him out behind the barn. He unwrapped something from oilcloth. A rifle, Winchester model 1902, single shot, .22 caliber. It had belonged to Eli's grandfather. William Thornwell handed the rifle to his son. Then he handed him a small cardboard box, 10 cartridges. "This is yours for the summer," his father said. 10 bullets. Make them last until fall." Eli held the box like it was made of glass. "Garden needs protecting. Gophers will eat everything if you let them. Your job is to keep them out. Use these careful. Once they're gone, they're gone." This was the Depression before it had a name. Every resource mattered. Every waste had consequences. 10 bullets for 3 months. Eli was 9 years old, and suddenly responsible for whether his family ate vegetables that winter. The first gopher appeared 3 days later. Eli ran for the Winchester, loaded 1 precious cartridge, settled into shooting position, aimed, fired. The crack of the rifle echoed across the farm. The gopher dropped, dead center. Then he noticed something. The other gophers had vanished. Every single one. Disappeared into their burrows. The loud crack had sent them underground, for hours. By the time they emerged again, they'd already done damage. 2 bullets spent. 2 days passed, 1 dead gopher, and the garden was still getting destroyed. He sat on the porch that evening, turning the problem over in his mind. There had to be a better way. 2 weeks later, his uncle Silas arrived. Silas Thornwell was William's older brother. He lived alone in the Oklahoma Panhandle, a trapper, had been for 20 years. He caught coyotes and foxes and sold the pelts. He came into town maybe 3 times a year, always unexpected. After dinner, Silas walked out to the garden with Eli. He examined the gopher damage without comment. Then he looked at Eli. "Your daddy give you that Winchester?" "Yes, sir." "How many bullets?" 10 for the whole summer." "And how many you got left?" Eli hesitated. 7. "Killed 3 gophers?" 1. Silas looked at the garden again. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost amused. "You're hunting wrong, boy." Eli felt his face flush. "I hit what I aim at." "I don't doubt it, but you're thinking too loud." Silas squatted down, picked up a dirt clod, crumbled it between his fingers. "Gophers live in groups. You shoot one, the sound scares them all. They go underground. You wait. They come back. You shoot another. They run again. You're fighting the whole colony, and losing." Eli nodded slowly. This was exactly the problem. "Sound ain't the enemy, Eli. Fear is. You make 'em scared, they run. You make 'em uncertain, they freeze. You want 'em frozen." "How?" Silas walked to his wagon, returned with his rifle and a potato. He pulled out a hunting knife, carefully carved into the potato, hollowed out the center, left the walls thick. Then he slid the potato over the barrel, tied it in place with twine. "Watch." They walked to where prairie dogs had colonies in the uncultivated land. Silas settled into position. A prairie dog appeared. He aimed, fired. The rifle made a muffled thump, like someone dropping a heavy sack. The prairie dog fell. But the other prairie dogs didn't run. They looked around, confused, uncertain. Silas chambered another round, aimed, fired again. Another muffled thump. Another prairie dog down. The others still didn't flee. By the 4th shot, the potato had disintegrated, but 4 prairie dogs lay dead. He looked at Eli. Potato absorbs some of the blast, diffuses the flash. Sound is still there, but it's wrong. Animals hear it and don't recognize danger. Not right away. Gives you time. Eli's mind was racing. Does it work on gophers? Works on anything with ears. That evening, Eli went to his mother's garden. She grew potatoes, but she also grew something better. Cucumbers. Thick, dense, high water content. Eli examined them.
Cucumbers had thicker walls, more consistent in size. The water content meant they could absorb more heat. He picked one. His mother came out. "Elias Thornwell, you planning to eat that or stare at it?" "Can I use it, Mama? For hunting?" "If it protects my garden, you can use the whole crop." The next morning, Eli went hunting. 3 gophers appeared near the lettuce. Eli loaded the Winchester, mounted the cucumber, aimed, fired. The muffled thump. The gopher dropped. The other 2 looked around, confused, not running. The bolt slid smooth. Second shot. Second gopher down. The third finally started to move. Eli fired again. 3 shots, 3 dead gophers. And the cucumber was still mostly intact. 5 gophers down that day. 1 bullet wasted testing the technique. 4 bullets remaining for the rest of summer. His father saw the results that evening. 5 dead gophers lined up on the fence post. His father didn't smile, didn't praise, just looked at the dead gophers. Looked at his son. Good. That summer, Eli became the guardian of his mother's garden. He refined the cucumber technique, learned that fresh was better than stored, that you could get 3 good shots, maybe 4 if lucky, before the vegetable failed. By summer's end, he'd killed 37 gophers, using 7 bullets total. His mother's garden produced enough vegetables to carry the family through winter. What Eli didn't know was that he'd just learned the most valuable skill he'd ever possess. Understanding how to make your enemy confused instead of scared. How to use sound psychology instead of firepower. How to improvise solutions with whatever materials you had available. Those lessons were going to save American lives. 17 years later, 3,000 miles away, in a war that hadn't started yet, the years between 1928 and 1941 passed like seasons on the Oklahoma plains. Predictable, harsh, unforgiving. Eli grew. By age 16, he could hit a running jackrabbit at 300 yards, could estimate windage by feel, could read weather in the behavior of birds. Survival skills, the kind you learned when every missed shot meant less food. The Dust Bowl came in 1935. Black Sunday. The sky turned dark at noon. The Thornwell farm survived, barely. Neighbors packed up, left for California. The Thornwells stayed, because leaving meant admitting defeat. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. The radio brought news of war in Europe. Eli was 20, working the farm, wondering if there was anything beyond Cimarron County. Then came December 7th, 1941. Eli was in the barn when his mother called him. Pearl Harbor. Attacked. Burning. Thousands dead. His father stood by the radio, silent. His hand unconsciously touched his left leg, where France had left its permanent mark. Eli looked at his father. "I'm going." William Thornwell studied his son, 22 years old, strong from farm work. "I know," his father said. 3 days later, Eli enlisted in Boise City. The sergeant asked if he could shoot. Eli said he'd been hunting since he was 9. The sergeant wrote it down. Neither man knew this simple answer would eventually matter more than any other qualification. Boot camp happened at Fort Sill. The army taught him to march, to salute, to follow orders. On the rifle range, they taught him to shoot the army way. Eli qualified expert marksman, 49 out of 50 targets at 300 yards. The range instructor pulled him aside. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that, Thornwell?" "Killing gophers, Sergeant, with limited ammunition." "Gophers don't shoot back." "No, Sergeant, but gophers are smaller targets." In 1943, the Army started forming specialized sniper sections. Eli's name appeared on a list. Advanced training at Camp Perry, Ohio. This was science, windage calculations, bullet drop compensation, range estimation, camouflage theory, how to kill from distances where the enemy never knew you existed. Eli absorbed it all. But he noticed contradictions. The instructors taught 1 shot, 1 kill. Never fire multiple times from the same position. This made sense in theory, but Eli had learned different lessons. Sometimes staying in one position was the best position. Sometimes breaking the rules worked better. He kept these thoughts to himself. Graduated near the top of his class. In September 1944, shipped to Europe with the 2nd Infantry Division. The war was entering its final phase, but the fighting was far from over. Germans were retreating, but retreating soldiers can be the most dangerous. Eli's division deployed to the Netherlands. The Scheldt campaign. A brutal fight through flooded lowlands. The Germans had blown the dikes, turned regions into freezing swamps. Eli was paired with a spotter named Boone Rafferty, a fisherman from Louisiana, 28 years old, patient as stone. They worked together the way good teams do, without excess communication. Over 6 months, from September 1944 through March 1945, Eli accumulated 37 confirmed kills. Steady, professional, unremarkable by sniper standards. Then came April. On April 12, 1945, Eli's position took artillery fire. He was fine. His rifle was fine. His scope was not. The optic lens shattered into pieces too small to be useful. The whole assembly useless. He reported it to the supply sergeant, a weary corporal from Pennsylvania. No replacement scopes available. You want to keep sniping? You'll have to figure something out. Eli could wait, go back to regular infantry work, or he could solve the problem. That afternoon, walking through an abandoned Dutch farmhouse, he saw them. Cucumbers, growing wild in the kitchen garden, untended, but still producing. Thick, green, perfect. He stopped, stared at those cucumbers, and something in his mind clicked. A memory. 17 years old, his Uncle Silas. A potato on a rifle barrel. The muffled thump instead of a crack. He picked a cucumber, held it, remembered the summer of 1928. 37 gophers with 7 bullets. Germans weren't gophers, but the psychology was the same. Boone found him standing in the garden, holding a cucumber. "Thornwell, you planning to eat that or marry it?" "Get me 3 more, the big ones." "Why?" "I'm going to show you something I learned when I was 9 years old." Back at their position, Eli pulled out his trench knife, started carving. Boone watched with increasing confusion as Eli hollowed out the cucumber, left thick walls, created a clean interior, then secured the cucumber to his rifle muzzle with cloth strips and copper wire. "What in God's name are you doing?" "Making a suppressor." "From a vegetable?" "Yes," Eli explained. The physics, the psychology, how it worked on gophers, how it might work on Germans. "You're telling me this actually works?" "It worked on prairie dogs. Germans have ears, same as prairie dogs. Germans also have guns, which is why they won't know where we're shooting from." The next morning brought opportunity. Intelligence reported a German headquarters element occupying a farm complex 200 yards from American lines. Battalion planned an artillery barrage, followed by infantry assault. Standard procedure, also expensive. Eli approached Lieutenant Patterson, West Point educated, skeptical by training, but practical. "Sir, give me 30 minutes before the barrage. I can break their defense." Patterson looked at the cucumber, duct-taped to Eli's rifle. "Corporal, is that a vegetable on your weapon?" "Yes, sir. Sound suppression." "You're joking." "No, sir. It works. I've tested it." "On what?" "Gophers, sir, back in Oklahoma." A long silence. Finally, 30 minutes. If this doesn't work, we proceed with artillery." "Yes, sir." The years between 1928 and 1941 passed like seasons on the Oklahoma plains. Predictable, harsh, unforgiving. Eli grew. The cucumbers kept coming, the gophers kept dying. By the time he was 16, he could hit a running jackrabbit at 300 yards, could estimate windage by feel, could read weather in the behavior of birds. These were not remarkable skills for a farm boy. These were survival skills, the kind you learned when every missed shot meant less food on the table. The Dust Bowl came in 1935, Black Sunday, April 14th. The sky turned dark at noon. Dust rolled across the plains like an ocean wave.
20-foot walls of dirt that buried fences and killed cattle and turned day into night. The Thornwell farm survived. Barely. Other farms didn't. Neighbors packed up. Left for California. Left for anywhere that wasn't Oklahoma. The Thornwells stayed, because leaving meant admitting defeat. And William Thornwell had not survived France just to surrender to dirt.
In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. The radio brought news of war in Europe. Eli was 20, working the farm, thinking about the future, wondering if there was anything beyond Cimarron County. Then came December 7th, 1941. Eli was in the barn when his mother called him. The radio was on. The announcer's voice shook. Pearl Harbor, attacked, burning, thousands dead, America at war. His father stood by the radio, silent. His hand unconsciously touched his left leg, where the shrapnel still lived, where France had left its permanent mark. Eli looked at his father. "I'm going." William Thornwell turned slowly, studied his son, 22 years old, strong from farm work, steady hands, sharp eyes, everything the army would want. "I know," his father said. 3 days later, Eli enlisted at the recruiting station in Boise City. The sergeant asked if he could shoot. Eli said he'd been hunting since he was 9. The sergeant wrote it down, moved to the next question. Neither man knew that this simple answer would eventually matter more than any other qualification. Boot camp happened at Fort Sill, just south of Oklahoma City, close enough that Eli could recognize the landscape, far enough that it felt like a different world. The army taught him to march, to salute, to follow orders without question. On the rifle range, they taught him to shoot the army way. Eli qualified expert marksman, 49 out of 50 targets at 300 yards. The one miss was because the rifle sight was slightly off. Eli had noticed, adjusted, hit the last 10 straight. The range instructor, Drill Sergeant Wilson, pulled him aside. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that, Thornwell?" "Killing gophers, Sergeant, with limited ammunition." Wilson stared at him, trying to decide if this was a joke, decided it wasn't. "Gophers don't shoot back." "No, Sergeant, but gophers are smaller targets." Wilson almost smiled, almost. "Well, the Germans are bigger. Try not to miss." In 1943, the Army started forming specialized sniper sections. They needed men who could shoot, who could think, who could work alone under pressure. Eli's name appeared on a list. He was sent to advanced training at Camp Perry, Ohio. This was different from basic marksmanship. This was science, windage calculations, bullet drop compensation, range estimation using mil dots, camouflage theory, fieldcraft, how to move without being seen, how to hide in plain sight, how to kill from distances where the enemy never knew you existed. Eli absorbed it all. But he noticed contradictions. The instructors taught deliberate, methodical shooting. One shot, one kill. Never fire multiple times from the same position. Never reveal your location. This made sense in theory, but Eli had learned different lessons on the prairie. Sometimes you needed rapid fire. Sometimes staying in one position was the best position. Sometimes breaking the rules worked better than following them. He kept these thoughts to himself. Graduated near the top of his class, and in September 1944 shipped out to Europe with the 2nd Infantry Division. By then, the war was entering its final phase. D-Day had succeeded. France was liberated. The Allies were pushing into Germany. But the fighting was far from over. The Germans were retreating, but retreating soldiers can be the most dangerous. Cornered, desperate, fighting for their homeland now instead of conquered territory. Eli's division deployed to the Netherlands, the Scheldt campaign, a brutal, grinding fight through flooded lowlands and fortified positions. The Germans had blown the dikes, turned entire regions into freezing swamps. American forces advanced along narrow roads and causeways, perfect killing grounds for defenders. This was where Eli learned that training and reality were distant cousins. In training, you had time, you calculated range, you accounted for every variable, you took the perfect shot. In combat, perfection was a luxury. Speed mattered, instinct mattered. Taking the 70% shot now was better than waiting for the perfect shot that never came. Eli was paired with a spotter named Boone Rafferty, a fisherman from Louisiana, 28 years old, patient as stone. They worked together the way good teams do, without excess communication. Boone would identify targets, call range and windage. Eli would shoot. They'd move, repeat. Over 6 months, from September 1944 through March 1945, Eli accumulated 37 confirmed kills. Steady, professional, unremarkable by sniper standards. He was doing his job, doing it well, but nothing that would make it into any history books. Each kill was a man. Eli understood this, tried not to think about it during the work, but at night, in cold foxholes, the understanding came anyway. 37 men who'd woken up that morning, eaten breakfast, written letters home maybe, made plans for after the war.
Then Eli had ended them. From distances where they never knew he existed. Was this honorable? He didn't know. Was it necessary? Yes. The mathematics were clear. If he didn't kill them, they'd kill Americans. The sniper's job was removing threats before they became casualties. But knowing something is necessary doesn't make it easy to carry. Then came April. April 1945. The war was ending. Everyone knew it. The Germans knew it. But knowing a war is ending and ending a war are different things. There were still pockets of resistance, still soldiers willing to die for a cause already lost, still battles to be fought. On April 12th, Eli's position took artillery fire. Random, unlucky. A German gun crew bracketing American positions. The shells walked across their sector. Most hit nothing. One hit close enough that shrapnel peppered Eli's foxhole. He was fine. His rifle was fine. His scope was not. The optic lens shattered, not broken, shattered, into pieces too small to be useful. The scope mount bent, the whole assembly useless. Eli reported it to the supply sergeant, a weary corporal from Pennsylvania who looked 60 but was probably 35. He checked his inventory, shook his head. No replacement scopes available. You want to keep sniping, you'll have to figure something out. When's the next supply drop? Maybe a week, maybe never. We're prioritizing ammunition and medical supplies. Scopes are tertiary. Eli understood, made sense. Rifle scopes were useful, but not as useful as bullets or morphine. He could wait, go back to regular infantry work, or he could solve the problem. That afternoon he was walking through an abandoned Dutch farmhouse, looking for anything useful: food, blankets, intelligence documents. The farm had been evacuated weeks ago. The family fled or dead. Their possessions remained: furniture, photographs, a life interrupted. In the kitchen garden, Eli saw them. Cucumbers, growing wild, untended, but still producing. Thick, green, perfect. He stopped walking, stared at those cucumbers, and something in his mind clicked. A memory. 17 years old, his uncle Silas, a potato on a rifle barrel, the muffled thump instead of a crack. He picked a cucumber, held it, felt the weight, the density. Remembered the summer of 1928, 37 gophers with 7 bullets. Because the sound was wrong, because confused animals freeze instead of run. Germans weren't gophers, but the psychology was the same. And if it worked, if the technique translated from prairie to battlefield, he could be effective again, could protect his men, could do his job. But there was another thought, quieter, darker. If it worked too well, how many more men would he kill? Was he trying to solve a tactical problem or enable himself to kill more efficiently? He pushed the thought aside. Soldiers didn't have the luxury of philosophy during war. That came after, if you survived. Boone found him standing in the garden, unholding a cucumber, staring at it like it held answers. "Thornwell, you planning to eat that or marry it?" Eli looked at his spotter. "Get me 3 more, the big ones." "Why?" "I'm going to show you something I learned when I was 9 years old." Back at their position, Eli pulled out his trench knife, started carving. Boone watched with increasing confusion as Eli hollowed out the cucumber, left thick walls, created a clean interior chamber, then took strips of cloth from his equipment and copper wire from a broken radio, secured the cucumber to the muzzle of his Springfield. Boone stared.
What in God's name are you doing? Making a suppressor. From a vegetable? Yes. That's insane. Probably. Eli explained. The physics, the psychology, how it worked on gophers, how it might work on Germans. Boone listened. His expression cycled through disbelief, skepticism, and finally something like cautious hope. You're telling me this actually works? It worked on prairie dogs. Germans have ears same as prairie dogs. Germans also have guns, which is why they won't know where we're shooting from. The next morning brought opportunity. Intelligence reported a German headquarters element occupying a farm complex 200 yards from American lines. Battalion planned an artillery barrage, followed by infantry assault. Standard procedure. Also expensive. Artillery was loud. Germans would hunker down. Infantry would take casualties clearing buildings. Eli had a different idea. He approached Lieutenant Patterson, West Point educated, skeptical by training, but also practical enough to listen to ideas from enlisted men who'd kept him alive for 6 months. Sir, give me 30 minutes before the barrage. I can break their defense. Patterson looked at him, at Boone, at the cucumber duct-taped to Eli's rifle. Corporal, is that a vegetable on your weapon? Yes, sir. Why? Sound suppression, sir. Patterson blinked, looked again. You're joking. No, sir, it works. I've tested it. On what? Gophers, sir. Back in Oklahoma. A long silence. Patterson clearly trying to decide if his sniper had lost his mind. Finally, 30 minutes. If this doesn't work, we proceed with artillery. Yes, sir. And Thornwell, if you get yourself killed doing something stupid with a cucumber, I'm putting that in your casualty report. Understood, sir. At 05:45 hours, April 23rd, 1945, Eli and Boone moved into position. They used a drainage ditch, slow, careful. By 0600, they had sight lines on the German position. Boone counted 12 visible soldiers, probably more inside the buildings. Morning routine, relaxed, smoking, talking. They thought they were safe. Eli settled the Springfield, mounted the cucumber. Through his iron sights, since his scope was destroyed, he aimed at a German officer standing by a Kubelwagen. The man was studying a map. Giving orders. Leadership. Boone whispered range and wind. 200 yards. Wind 3 miles per hour, left to right. Eli adjusted, breathed. The familiar rhythm, the moment between decision and action. He fired. The sound was wrong, beautifully wrong. Not the sharp crack of a rifle, a muffled thump, like a car door closing in the distance. The officer collapsed. The map fell. The other Germans froze. Confusion is a weapon. Eli knew this, had known it since he was 9 years old. The bolt slid back smooth, chambered another round. Eli aimed at a sergeant running toward the fallen officer. Fired. The sergeant went down. Another muffled thump. More confusion. Germans shouting, looking around, seeing nothing, hearing something but not recognizing it as rifle fire. Third shot. A soldier scanning the tree line. Wrong direction. Eli put a round through his chest. The cucumber was smoking now, hot, but still intact. Fourth shot. A radio man trying to call for help. Gone. The cucumber split. 3 pieces. Eli pulled it off, grabbed another from his pack, mounted it. 8 seconds. He'd practiced this. Muscle memory now. 5th shot. A machine gunner setting up. Dropped before he could fire. 6th shot. Another officer trying to organize a response. Dead before he could finish his sentence. 7th shot. A soldier firing randomly at shadows, not firing anymore. By now, the remaining Germans were in full panic, running for buildings, diving for cover, firing at ghosts. Some were shooting at trees 300 yards opposite Eli's actual position. The muffled sound had completely disoriented them. Eli held fire, watched. 7 Germans down in less than 3 minutes. The position was broken, leadership dead, communications dead, defense shattered. At 6:15, the infantry assault began. They found minimal resistance. Most Germans had fled. The few who remained surrendered immediately. The farm complex was secured by 6:30. 0 American casualties. Lieutenant Patterson found Eli and Boone at 0700. He looked at the split cucumbers lying in the grass, looked at Eli, looked at the 7 dead Germans being processed by Graves registration. "Explain this to me, Corporal." Eli picked up one of the used cucumbers, still warm, the interior charred black. "Vegetable absorbs some of the muzzle blast, sir, diffuses the flash. Sound is still there, but it's muffled. Wrong. Enemy hears it but doesn't recognize it as rifle fire. Not immediately. Creates confusion. Confusion creates hesitation. Hesitation creates opportunity." Patterson examined the cucumber, sniffed it. The burnt vegetable smell mixed with cordite. He looked at Eli like he was seeing him for the first time. "Where did you learn this?" "Oklahoma, sir. Shooting gophers. This is the strangest thing I've seen in this entire war." "Does it work, sir?" Patterson looked at the farm, at the secured position, at the 0 casualties. "Yes, Corporal, it works." He paused. "I'm putting this in my after-action report, but I don't think anyone at headquarters will believe it." "Don't need them to believe it, sir. Just need Germans to keep dying confused." Word spread fast through the company. By evening, half the battalion knew about Thornwell and his cucumber trick. Some thought it was a joke. Some thought it was genius. A few other snipers tried to replicate it. None had Eli's 17 years of practice. None had learned it as children. None had the muscle memory. The technique worked, but only in very specific hands. But someone else heard about it too. Across the lines, in a German command post 3 miles east, intelligence officers were interrogating prisoners. American prisoners captured during a failed patrol. One had witnessed the farm attack from a distance, described what he'd seen: Germans falling from invisible fire. No loud shots, no visible position, just men dying and others panicking. The intelligence report reached the desk of Hauptmann Klaus Richter, 35 years old, a professional soldier since 1933, a veteran of Poland, France and Russia, an expert counter-sniper, a hunter of hunters. He'd killed 23 Allied snipers across 3 years, each one a trophy, each one proof of his superiority. Richter read the report twice. The details intrigued him: invisible fire, acoustic confusion. Then examined the battlefield personally the next morning under flag of truce to recover German dead. Found the split cucumbers among the debris, picked one up, studied it, the hollowed interior, the burn marks, the improvised binding. He spoke to his aide in German. "The Americans have developed an improvised sound suppressor. Gemüse, vegetables." The aide looked confused. "Sir? Look at this. Carved out, mounted to barrel. It would work, temporarily, enough to create acoustic confusion." He dropped the cucumber, crushed it under his boot. "This is clever, very clever. Unconventional, the mark of either a genius or a desperate fool." "What do we do, sir?" Richter's eyes narrowed. "We find out who did this. I want to know which American sniper is using this technique. Name, unit, position, everything." "Why, sir? It's just one man with vegetables." "Because if he's this creative, he's dangerous. Dangerous enemies deserve respect." Richter paused. "And elimination. This American has killed 7 of my soldiers using a technique I've never encountered. That makes him interesting. And worthy prey." The aide hesitated. "Do you think he's that good, sir?" "I think he's smart enough to improvise, which makes him more dangerous than 10 soldiers with better equipment. Yes, he's that good. And I'm going to kill him." Richter began organizing. Counter-sniper teams, observation posts, intelligence gathering. He wanted everything about this cucumber ghost: where he operated, how often, patterns, vulnerabilities. The hunt had begun. But Eli didn't know it yet. Didn't know that his creativity had marked him. That somewhere across the lines, a professional killer was studying his methods, planning his death. Eli was cleaning his rifle, preparing more cucumbers, thinking about the next mission, about how many more Germans he could kill before someone figured out how to stop him. He would find out soon enough. The hunter had become the hunted, and he didn't even know it yet. April 24th would bring the bridge. April 25th would bring the crossroads, and somewhere between those 2 days, Eli would meet the man who'd been hunting him. One of them would survive, the other would not. But for now, on the evening of April 23rd, Eli sat with Boone, sharing a cigarette. Neither man smoked regularly, but after days like this, the ritual helped. 7 Germans today, Boone said quietly. 7. You feel anything about it? Eli was silent for a long moment. I feel like I did my job, protected our men.
That's what snipers do. That's not what I asked.
Eli looked at him. What do you want me to say, Boone? That I feel guilty? I don't. Not yet. Maybe I will later. After the war. If I survive. But right now I feel like those 7 Germans would have killed Americans if I hadn't killed them first. So I did what was necessary. Necessary isn't the same as right. No, but it's all we have. They finished the cigarette in silence. Somewhere in the darkness, artillery rumbled. Distant, constant, the background noise of war. Tomorrow would bring more killing, more necessity, more mathematics written in blood. But tonight, for a few hours, Eli could sleep, could not think about the faces, could not wonder about the families, could not question whether efficiency in killing was something to perfect or something to be ashamed of. Tomorrow's work would come soon enough. And somewhere across the lines, Klaus Richter was sharpening his own skills, preparing his own weapons, planning how to kill the American ghost. The collision was inevitable. Only the timing remained uncertain. April 25th, 1945. 0200 hours. Battalion intelligence identified a German strongpoint blocking the advance. 120 soldiers, well fortified, holding a critical crossroads. The American plan: full-scale assault, 2 companies, artillery preparation, armor support. Projected casualties: 40 men, maybe more. Eli requested a meeting with the battalion commander, a major from Texas who'd seen too much war. Sir, give me 12 hours. I can break them. The major looked at him, at the exhaustion in his face. Thornwell, you're 1 man. That's a company-strength position. They won't know it's 1 man. That's the advantage. Your spotter is in a hospital. He came back, sir, against medical orders. This was true. Boone had left the field hospital that evening, arm in a sling, pale, determined. The major considered, looked at the map, at the casualty projections. You have until dawn. If our position is still intact, we go with the assault. Yes, sir. Eli and Boone moved out at 0230, through enemy territory, using drainage ditches and hedgerows. They carried 12 cucumbers, 300 rounds, and the accumulated weight of 2 days of killing. By 0545, they were in position, 150 yards from German headquarters. They could see the defensive layout, machine gun positions, mortar pits, command post, radio antenna. Boone scanned with binoculars, one-handed, awkward but functional. I count 47 visible, probably 70-80 total. This is ambitious, Eli. Ambitious is better than 40 dead Americans. At 0558, Eli saw something through his iron sights that made him pause. Hauptmann Klaus Richter, the German counter-sniper, standing by the command post, talking to officers. The man who'd shot Boone. Perfect shot, 160 yards, broadside. Eli could end the threat. Revenge for Boone. But next to Richter, a radio man was speaking into a handset, calling for reinforcements. If those reinforcements arrived, the American assault would face double the enemy strength. 2 targets, 1 second to decide. Eli chose mission over revenge, fired at the radio man. The muffled thump. The radio man fell. Richter spun, alert, professional, scanning for the source. He knew what that sound meant. He was ready. But Eli had already moved, shifted position, 20 yards. They were ghosts. For the next 40 minutes, Eli and Boone executed the most efficient killing of Eli's life. Boone would identify targets, machine gunners first, officers second, anyone organizing resistance third. Eli would fire, move. Fire again. Change cucumbers every 3 shots. Constant motion. The Germans fell into chaos. Their leaders kept dying. Their machine guns kept going silent, and they couldn't locate the source. Some fired at shadows, some ran, some froze. All were trapped in a nightmare where death came without warning. By 0630, Boone had marked 41 kills on his paper. Eli trusted it absolutely. The German position was broken, soldiers fleeing east, abandoning equipment. But one moment stayed with Eli, would stay forever. At 0626, he'd aimed at a German soldier, maybe 30 years old, veteran probably. As Eli squeezed the trigger, a younger soldier walked into the sight picture. Maybe 18, 19 at most, fresh-faced, scared. The bullet hit the young soldier, not center mass, shoulder. He fell, screaming, calling for help in German. The older soldier, the one Eli had intended to kill, ran to help him, exposed himself completely. Perfect target. Eli had the shot, clear, easy. He didn't fire. He watched as the older soldier dragged the younger one to cover, watched them disappear into a building, removed his finger from the trigger. Boone whispered, "You had him." "I know." Something in watching that older soldier risk his life to save the younger one, something in the humanity of that moment, made Eli choose mercy. It wasn't professional, wasn't tactical, but Eli did it anyway. Because somewhere in the last 48 hours, the line between necessary and inhuman had become too blurred. At 900, American forces occupied the crossroads, found it abandoned, and split cucumbers scattered in the grass. Battalion command arrived at 1000. The major found Eli cleaning his rifle. "How many, Corporal?" Boone showed his paper. 41 marks for today, plus 19 from yesterday, plus 37 from the previous 6 months. 97 total. The major stared. 97 confirmed kills. In 48 hours? "Yes, sir." "This isn't possible." "It happened, sir." The major looked at Eli, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the hollow eyes, the weight of 97 souls. "I'm recommending you for the Medal of Honor."
"Oh, please don't, sir."
"Why not?" "Because I don't want recognition for this. Men are alive because of what I did. That's enough." The major started to argue, stopped, recognized something in Eli's face, the look of a man who'd done necessary things and would carry them forever. "Understood, Corporal." 13 days later, Germany surrendered. Eli was in a small Dutch town when he heard, sharing drinks with what remained of his platoon. Someone toasted the cucumber ghost. That's what the Germans had called him, der Gurkengeist. Eli didn't acknowledge the toast, just stared at his drink. Thought about the 97 Germans, the 18-year-old he'd wounded, the faces he'd seen through his scope in the seconds before they died. 3 days after the surrender, Eli was processing German POWs for transport, going through the line, checking names against lists, standard procedure. Then he saw him, Hauptmann Klaus Richter, wounded, left arm in a sling from a different engagement, but alive. Standing in the surrender line with 60 other German soldiers, their eyes met. Recognition was instant. Hunter and Hunter. The man who'd shot Boone, the man Eli had spared at the crossroads. Richter's English was precise. "You are the cucumber ghost." Eli didn't confirm or deny. "I studied your technique after finding the evidence. Clever. Very clever. I tried to kill you. Failed." "I had a shot at you," Eli said quietly. "Didn't take it." Richter looked surprised. "Why?" "Mission was more important than revenge." A long silence. Then Richter nodded slowly, something like respect in his eyes. "You were the better soldier. On that day in that place you were better. I am alive because you chose mercy. I will remember this." Eli watched him shuffle away toward the POW trucks, headed for camps, then home eventually. Both of them survivors. Both of them haunted. The enemy had a name, had a face, had honor. This somehow made it worse. August 1945, Cimarron County, Oklahoma. Eli's father met him at the train station. They shook hands. didn't embrace. Oklahoma men didn't. You made it back. Yes, sir. They drove to the farm in silence. His mother cried when she saw him, held him, asked if he was hurt. He said no. Physically, this was true. He took his old job at the Tulsa Iron Works, machinist, operating lathes to tolerances of 1/1000th of an inch. Precision work, quiet, predictable. In November 1946, he married Grace Whitmore, a schoolteacher. Kind, patient. She knew he'd been a soldier. He never told her he'd been a sniper, never mentioned the 97. They had 3 children. Eli taught them to shoot, taught them to be careful. Never taught them the cucumber trick. Some knowledge dies with its creator. The nightmares continued, the faces, the ones who never saw it coming, the ones who died confused, and the one who didn't die, the 18-year-old German boy, wounded, screaming. The mercy Eli had shown. Did the boy survive? Did he go home? Or did he die later from infection? Eli would never know. And that, not knowing, was its own kind of haunting. Boone Rafferty returned to Louisiana, went back to fishing the Atchafalaya. They exchanged letters twice a year, Christmas and the anniversary of April 25th. Neither man wrote about the war. They wrote about weather, fishing, crops, the things that mattered to men who'd seen too much death. Boone died in 1982, heart attack on his fishing boat. Eli went to the funeral, met Boone's grandchildren. They asked what Grandpa Boone did in the war. Eli said he was a brave man who saved a lot of lives, which was true, just not complete. In 1968, a military historian named Dr. Robert Hayes found Eli, tracked him down through declassified after-action reports, asked for an interview. Eli agreed on one condition: nothing published until after his death. They sat in Eli's workshop, Hayes with a tape recorder, Eli with a cucumber from his garden. At Hayes's request, he demonstrated the technique one final time, carved the cucumber, mounted it, fired 3 suppressed shots at a target 200 yards away. Hayes asked the question everyone would want answered. Do you feel guilt about the 97 men you killed? Eli was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was steady, measured. I feel guilt about the war, about the waste, about the fact that it happened at all. But guilt about killing those 97? No. They were soldiers, following orders, like me. They would have killed Americans if they'd had the chance. I was better at my job than they were at theirs. That doesn't make me a hero. It makes me a survivor. The guilt I carry isn't for the Germans I killed. It's for the Americans I couldn't save. Every man who died in my sector, I wonder if I could have prevented it. That's what wakes me up at night. What do you want people to understand about the cucumber technique? That it wasn't about cucumbers, it was about using whatever resources you have to solve the problem in front of you. I grew up poor, in the Depression, in Oklahoma. You learned to improvise, to make do. The military gave me a rifle. I brought the improvisation. The lesson isn't to use vegetables as suppressors. The lesson is, don't let inadequate equipment determine your outcome. Figure it out, adapt, overcome. That's not just military philosophy, that's life. Hayes asked more questions, about tactics, about numbers. Eli answered them all, factually, without embellishment. Elias Thornwell died in January 1994. He was 75 years old, heart attack, quick. His obituary in the local paper mentioned his military service, mentioned his work at the iron foundry, mentioned his family. It didn't mention cucumbers, or gophers, or 97 Germans, exactly how Eli wanted it. His daughter donated his personal effects to the National World War II Museum in 2003. His diary, his notebook, the interview transcript from 1968. But in that archive, preserved in Eli's careful handwriting, is the record. 97 marks, 48 hours, and a note at the bottom. Did what was necessary. Wish it hadn't been. Modern military analysis confirms the cucumber technique would have provided tactical advantage. Special forces have tested similar field expedient suppressors. The physics works, temporarily. enough to create confusion. But the real weapon wasn't the cucumber. It was the psychology. Soldiers being killed by an enemy they couldn't locate, couldn't hear properly, couldn't fight, experienced terror that shattered defensive positions. Eli understood this instinctively, because he'd learned it as a 9-year-old boy protecting his mother's garden. Fear and confusion are more powerful than bullets. The technique died with him. The army never adopted it. Too individual, too dependent on specific skills, can't be standardized. But 97 Germans died because one Oklahoma farm boy refused to accept that inadequate equipment meant defeat. And somewhere between 65 and 80 American soldiers went home to their families because those 97 Germans weren't there to kill them. In 1987, in a small town in Bavaria, a retired schoolteacher named Klaus Richter died peacefully in his sleep. He was 77 years old. His obituary mentioned he'd been a soldier, mentioned he'd survived the war, mentioned his 40 years teaching history to German children. It didn't mention the American sniper who'd spared his life. But Richter's family donated his effects to a German military museum. In his diary, one entry from April 25, 1945. Today I learned that the best soldiers are not those who kill without hesitation, but those who kill only when necessary. The American ghost taught me this. He had me in his sights. He chose another target, mission over revenge. I hope to meet him again someday, to thank him. They never met again, but two soldiers on opposite sides of history's worst war understood something most never learn. The enemy is human. Victory requires killing them, but humanity requires remembering they were people first. Elias Thornwell carried 97 souls. Klaus Richter carried the weight of being spared. Both men understood survival is not the same as winning. That mathematics, that cold, brutal, necessary mathematics. That's what Eli carried for 49 years after the war ended. Not pride, not glory, not recognition, just the weight of 97 souls, and the knowledge that carrying them was the price of doing what was necessary. Some men deserve to be remembered, even when they spent their whole lives trying to be forgotten. And sometimes, the enemy you spare remembers you longer than the ones you killed.